Emily Carter never imagined her life would take such a sharp turn. At 28, she had just left behind the remnants of a 6-year relationship in the quiet suburbs of Kansas. It ended not with yelling or betrayal, but with silence, growing distance, unspoken needs, and a final goodbye that came through a half-closed door. She needed to leave, to breathe, to disappear for a while. That's when she found the listing. Live-in nanny needed, affluent Los Angeles family. Discretion and professionalism required. She packed her bags and left without saying much to anyone. The Whitmore estate was everything she imagined and more. Perched in the hills, the house gleamed with polished marble, glass walls, and furniture too pristine to sit on comfortably. Laura Whitmore met her at the gate, elegant, graceful, and intimidating. She walked with the air of someone used to being obeyed. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, but her handshake was firm. Emily was led into a perfectly arranged world, where even the flowers in the foyer looked like they were positioned by design rather than nature. Richard Whitmore wasn't home when Emily arrived. A businessman with international reach, she was told, always on the move. But she met Sophie, 6 years old with soft curls and a shy smile. It took less than a day for Sophie to cling to Emily as though she had known her forever. They played games, made pancakes with too much syrup, and built blanket forts that crumbled 5 minutes later. Emily found herself smiling more often than she had in months. It wasn't until the 3rd week that she met Daniel. She was in the kitchen organizing snacks for Sophie's lunch when she heard a car door slam and laughter. Deep male laughter. Turning around, she saw him walking through the hall, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, wearing dark sunglasses and a slight smirk. Daniel Whitmore, 24. Laura's son. Emily had known he existed, of course. He was away at Stanford finishing his last semester. She just didn't expect him to show up unannounced. "Hey," he said casually, glancing her way. "You must be the new nanny." His voice was smooth, and something about the way he said nanny made Emily's skin prickle. She smiled politely and introduced herself, but he barely listened. He walked past her to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, and left just as quickly as he came. She didn't see him again for 2 days. And then one night everything changed. It was just past midnight. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and Emily had woken to close Sophie's window after a gust blew it open. On her way back down, she heard a noise, a soft clinking of glass. Curious, she followed it to the balcony overlooking the back garden. Daniel was sitting there, a half-empty bottle of wine in front of him, hair damp from the drizzle. "You're up late," Emily said quietly. He didn't turn. "Could say the same to you." She hesitated, then walked closer. "Are you okay?" He looked at her finally, eyes heavy and distant. "Do you ever wonder what it's like to be invisible in your own home?" he asked. She blinked. "Sometimes." That answer made him laugh. Soft, bitter. He poured himself another glass but didn't offer her any. "This place looks perfect, doesn't it? But it's all show. My dad's never home, my mom's always judging, and the only real human in this house is 6 years old." Emily didn't know what to say to that, so she just stood beside him, watching the rain. After a moment, he handed her the wine glass without looking. She took it. They didn't talk much after that, but something had shifted. An unspoken connection. A shared loneliness that neither of them had words for. In the following days, the air between them began to change. Emily would be in the kitchen, and Daniel would walk in, brushing past her just a little too closely. When she was playing with Sophie in the garden, he'd lean out the window, watching them with a distant smile. At night, she'd catch a glimpse of him moving through the halls shirtless, earbuds in, pretending not to notice her. One afternoon, she found herself in the study, searching for a missing puzzle piece Sophie had flung across the room. She turned around and bumped directly into Daniel. Their eyes locked, their bodies inches apart. Neither moved for a moment too long. He didn't smile. He didn't flirt. He just looked at her like he was trying to read a language only she spoke. She stepped back quickly. "Sorry," she whispered. He didn't answer. Later that night, thunder rolled through the hills, waking Emily once again. She padded down the hall, intending to grab a glass of water. As she passed the balcony, she saw him again. This time he wasn't drinking. He was just sitting there, soaking wet, head in his hands. Something about him looked completely undone. "Daniel," she said, stepping out. "You'll get sick." He looked up at her. His eyes weren't cold this time. They were raw. "I don't want to feel like this anymore," he said. "Empty." Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He took it. For a second, just a second, time stood still. She could hear the rain, her own breath, the soft hum of her heart picking up speed. His thumb brushed her wrist. It was electric. Too much. Too dangerous. She pulled away. He didn't stop her. The next morning, Emily walked into the kitchen to find Laura already sitting at the breakfast table, sipping coffee. Her eyes followed Emily's every move. "You look tired," Laura said calmly. "Rough night." Emily froze. She smiled, trying to look unbothered. "Just the thunder." Laura's gaze didn't flinch. Storms tend to wake people. Especially when they're not where they're supposed to be." Emily's heart skipped. She didn't respond. And in that silence, everything began to unravel. Emily didn't sleep that night. Laura's words echoed in her mind like a riddle with no answer. Had she seen something? Or was it just a test, a warning? Either way, it was enough to make Emily tread carefully. She avoided Daniel for the next 2 days, filling her hours with Sophie, errands, and tidying corners of the house that didn't need cleaning. But avoidance had a way of fueling the fire. Daniel noticed, of course. He'd appear in doorways, leaning silently, watching her. He'd hover near the kitchen when she cooked, brushing her arm by accident as he reached past her. His presence was a pull, magnetic and warm, impossible to ignore. It finally happened on a Thursday afternoon. Sophie was napping, and Laura had left for a gallery opening downtown. The house was unusually quiet. Emily had gone out to the garden to water the hydrangeas when she heard the patio door slide open behind her. She didn't need to look. She already knew it was him. "You've been avoiding me," he said, not accusing, just stating. She didn't turn. "It's better this way." "For who?" Emily looked at him then. His expression wasn't smug or playful. It was open, honest. There was a vulnerability in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Before she could answer, he took a step forward. And then another. She backed up slightly, heart hammering. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But it still feels like the only thing that makes sense." He reached out and gently touched her cheek. She didn't move. His hand trembled. So did hers. When his lips found hers, it wasn't rushed or hungry. It was slow, measured, careful, like he was afraid she might vanish. She kissed him back. Once. And then she broke it, stepping away breathlessly. "I can't," she said. "I can't be that person." "You already are," he replied softly. She left him standing in the garden, went inside, and locked the door behind her. But something inside had shifted. A line had been crossed. And once crossed, it was impossible to erase. The days that followed were a blur of longing and secrecy. They didn't talk about what they were doing. They just did it. Glances became touches. Touches became kisses. Kisses turned into nights stolen in the guest bedroom while the rest of the house slept. It was dangerous, reckless, and it thrilled her. Daniel would slide into her room late at night, barefoot and quiet, whispering her name like a secret prayer. She would fall asleep with his hand in hers, wake up before sunrise, and slip back to her own bed before anyone noticed. At least that's what she hoped. During the day they acted normal. Emily cared for Sophie, played tea party games, read bedtime stories, and packed school lunches. Daniel stayed in his room, pretending to study, but his mind was never on his books. It was on her. Always her. Still, guilt crept in like slow poison. Emily started avoiding mirrors. She couldn't look herself in the eye. Every smile she gave Laura felt like a lie. Every thank you felt like theft. She wanted to confess, to walk away, to make it all stop. But every time she tried to create distance, Daniel pulled her back in. One afternoon they were in the laundry room, an absurdly luxurious space with marble counters and a chandelier. Daniel kissed her behind the open door. She pushed him away, breathless. This can't keep happening. He leaned in, forehead pressed to hers. Then tell me you don't feel it. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't lie. That night, she sat at her desk and opened her journal. Words poured out, words she'd never say aloud. I don't know who I am anymore. He makes me feel seen. But I hate what I'm becoming. Every day I lie to someone who trusts me. Child looks up to me. A woman gave me a place to stay. And I'm tearing all of that apart. She didn't sign it. She never signed her entries. Felt safer that way. One evening, Laura brought home a bottle of wine and offered Emily a glass. The two sat on the terrace while Sophie played inside. It was rare for Laura to initiate conversation beyond schedules and updates. Tonight her tone was lighter. But her eyes, as always, were unreadable. Daniel seems happier lately, she said, sipping slowly. Emily froze mid-sip. Does he? He used to sulk around this place. Now he's smiling more. Thing home. Strange, isn't it? Emily nodded, lips tight. I suppose. Laura tilted her head, watching her. You know, it's easy to underestimate how much I pay attention. But I've always known more than people think. The glass in Emily's hand trembled slightly. She forced a smile. I'm sure. Laura's expression didn't change. She simply reached for her purse, stood up and added, loyalty is a rare trait. I admire people who can keep their boundaries clean. The warning was clear. Yet the affair didn't stop. It intensified. Emily started sneaking into Daniel's room instead. They made love in near silence, afraid of every creak in the floorboards. They whispered promises neither fully believed. He told her he could leave with her, that they could start over. She smiled but said nothing. She didn't want fantasies. She wanted peace. One morning, Emily woke to find a small note on her nightstand, written in Daniel's handwriting. Let's run away. Just say the word. She held the note to her chest, heart pounding. For a moment she believed she might say yes. That evening, Laura returned home unexpectedly early. The front door creaked open just as Emily slipped out of Daniel's room. Her shirt slightly wrinkled, hair unbrushed. She looked up and saw her. Laura stood in the hallway, perfectly still. Their eyes met. For a moment no one spoke. No one moved. Then Laura turned and walked away in silence, heels echoing down the marble hall. Emily stood frozen, breath caught in her throat. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Emily stayed up all night waiting for something, anything. A knock on her door. Text. Summons. But the silence was complete. No footsteps in the hallway. No messages from Daniel, no late-night whispers. The house, once familiar, now felt like a cage. Every creak in the floor sounded like judgment. Every shadow held suspicion. By morning, the weight in her chest was unbearable. She dressed carefully, tied her hair back, and walked downstairs. Laura was already in the dining room, dressed in silk and sipping her usual black coffee. Sophie sat beside her, munching cereal, legs swinging. Morning, Emily said, her voice strained. Laura didn't look up. Good morning, Sophie, she said, brushing her daughter's hair behind her ear. Why don't you go play in the sunroom for a bit? Sophie obeyed, skipping off with a bowl of strawberries in hand. Emily stood silently, hands clenched behind her back. Laura finally looked up. Sit, she said. Emily did. For a moment neither spoke. Then Laura placed her coffee cup down, folded her hands and asked, Did you sleep with my son? Emily's breath caught. Her lips parted but no sound came. The truth was already there, in Laura's calm voice, in her unwavering eyes. There was no need to lie. Yes, she whispered. Laura nodded slowly, as if confirming something she already knew. How long? A few weeks, Emily said, barely audible. Laura exhaled through her nose and looked out the window. You know, I hired you because you seemed like the kind of woman who understood boundaries. Someone who wouldn't get emotionally involved. I didn't think I needed to say, "Don't sleep with my son." I assumed that was obvious. I never meant for it to happen, Emily said quickly. It just did. Laura's eyes narrowed. Of course it did. That's what people always say before everything burns down. There was no shouting, no tears, just quiet disappointment. Somehow that was worse. I think it's best if you pack your things today, Laura said. I'll have someone drive you to the airport by evening. Emily's heart sank. Can I say goodbye to Sophie? Laura paused. Briefly. But keep it simple. She stood, the conversation done. Emily returned to her room in a daze. She stared at the walls, the books on the shelf, the soft throw blanket Sophie had given her, and wondered how she had let it all crumble. For a moment she considered calling Daniel, begging him to say something to fix it, but no message came. No knock. Just silence. She packed slowly, folding everything with care. She left behind the books she borrowed, the perfume Laura once complimented, and the little white sweater Sophie had outgrown but insisted Emily keep, so you don't forget me. By afternoon she was ready. Sophie ran into her arms the moment she entered the sunroom. Are you leaving? Emily nodded, choking back tears. I have to. Will you come back? I don't know, sweet girl, she whispered. But I'll think of you every day. Sophie dug something out of her pocket, a drawing. A messy watercolor painting of a tree. 2 stick figures holding hands underneath. That's us, she said proudly. Emily folded it carefully and tucked it into her coat. When she walked out the front door, Daniel was standing at the top of the stairs. No words, just stillness. Their eyes met, and Emily waited, hoped for him to speak. But he didn't. He just stood there like a ghost watching her leave. And she did. The ride to the airport was silent. Emily kept her hand over the drawing in her coat pocket, pressing it close, as if it could somehow hold her together. Weeks passed, then months. Emily found work again, this time in Oregon, at a small daycare center by the coast. The pay was modest, the hours long, but it was honest, peaceful work. No lies, no marble floors, just children's laughter and ocean air. She rented a small apartment with a view of the sea. She filled it with thrifted furniture, books, and a plant she named Ivy. Each morning she walked to work. Each night she wrote in her journal. She wrote about mistakes, about guilt, but also about learning to breathe again. Sometimes she thought of Daniel, of his eyes in the rain, his fingers brushing hers, the way he said her name like it mattered. But the pain dulled over time, replaced by understanding. What they had wasn't love. It was need. And need, when left unchecked, could destroy anything. One late evening in early spring, she opened her mailbox to find a small padded envelope. There was no return address, just her name in neat cursive. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photo. Sophie stood in the Whitmore garden, holding the watercolor painting she had once given Emily. She was smiling wide, missing a front tooth. Behind her was the tree from the drawing, real now, full and green. On the back of the photo, written in a child's scrawl, I miss you, Emmy. Mommy said you're doing good things. I hope you come back someday. Emily stared at the message for a long time. Then she placed the photo on her desk, beside her journal, and smiled. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't forgiveness or closure from Laura. But it was something. Seed of peace. She stepped out onto her balcony, letting the ocean wind brush against her face. The sky was lavender with sunset, the horizon quiet and wide. And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like she was running. She felt like she had arrived.